There's a really cool clip of Steve Jobs in 1997. He's on stage at Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, back a little over a decade after originally being fired by Apple. He's taking questions from the audience, and this particular guy stands up and grabs the mic and asks a vicious question. He basically tears into Jobs, implying that he doesn't know what he's talking about, questioning the value that he brings to the company. It's just super aggressive. And I think one of the reasons it stuck with me all these years is because upon hearing it, my instinct as an observer was to be insulted for Steve Jobs. The guy just got lit up. And you'd think he'd fire back, defend himself and his accolades, of which there were obviously plenty to draw from, but that's not what he does at all. He instead does two things in particular that have, over time, added tremendous value to my worldview. The first thing, as I was kind of alluding to there, is he didn't at all get angry or defensive, which may seem like an easy thing to do, but again, observing it, like you can feel the tension there. It's like Jobs saw the criticism as merely procedural. That's it, right? As something to be expected as one builds. He completely depersonalized the attack as it was being fired his way. His exact quote was, you can please some of the people some of the time, but one of the hardest things when you're trying to affect change is that people like this gentleman are right in some areas. And I'll explain what he means when he says the guy's right in a minute or two here. But that response totally reduced the tension by 90%. Right? Understanding that there are going to be people who have things to say, some of which will question your ability and your effectiveness. And if you're looking from a 10,000-foot view, that's to be expected. And, this is the part that was shocking to me, warranted. Right? He says the criticism is warranted. Growth is messy and sloppy and a work in progress. And so criticism will, from time to time, hit the nail right on the head. And you, as a designer and creator, have to know that you'll both make mistakes and be called out for them. That's the way it goes. That's the contract one signs with the world in order to bring to life those things that are not yet visible. It's scary. It's intimidating, right? At least at first. Again, my reaction was to get defensive. But I think what made Steve great, as he smiled and jokingly said, "Here we go," mid-question, was the reassurance that, look, I signed up for this. So in actuality, it's a good thing. It's not an attack. It is growth. And I try and keep that in my back pocket as I do my thing, right? It's sharing your thoughts. It's a vulnerable thing. And if you are going to fall apart or crumble anytime someone's not totally in love with where you are at the moment or what you're creating or your last piece of work, you're in for a rude awakening. It's going to be a long journey. So that depersonalization is everything and incredibly valuable. And the second part brought a ton of value to me as a creator as well, just in a different way. And this is the part that I alluded to earlier when Steve said that his critic was, in some way, correct. When he was being hounded about his knowledge gap in some specific technology, right? I'm not really sure what the technology was. But Jobs basically explained that you're right, I'm not an expert there, but it's not about the specific technology or the minutia. It's about giving your consumers, your audience, the world, what it wants. It's about having a big picture, a vision. And that's what made Jobs so special, right? He didn't need to be involved at such a level of granularity. The vision changed, it revolutionized technology. Right? Because it was reverse engineered and brought to life. Here's his exact quote. Jobs said, one of the things I've always found is you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards for the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room, and I got the scar tissue to prove it, and I know that it's the case. End quote. That was an incredible thing for me to hear. If anything, because so often we get caught up in the weeds, right? We let the details drive the decisions, whether it's technology or anything else. And I often think of that, in my world. Don't worry about what's in place right now. Worry about where you need to be and then backfill to make it happen. And sure, some people might not get it. And sure, it will certainly mean you'll have to delve into areas you don't quite understand as you seek to support that vision or bring it to life. But that's the price that must be paid because vision is king. And so, taking those two concepts I just talked about, if you were to combine them, you'd walk away with the understanding that 1, growth is sloppy, criticism is inevitable. And 2, don't forget that adding value to the world should light your path. Not the little details that pique your interest along the way, right? Not everyone is going to get it as you build, and that's okay. And the way I see it, everyone is building something. And as they build, we'll surely come face to face with some sort of resistance. And while it's not always easy, there's value in finding the strength to smile to yourself and understand that resistance is merely part of growth. It's a necessary component of your evolution as you add value to the world. As you seek to leave yourself and the world around you better than it was yesterday. Aristotle has a quote that states, "To avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing." What a waste that would be of the potential and greatness contained within you to let it slip away for fear of what might be said. As Jobs explained, right, you can please some of the people some of the time, but it's not about that. The benchmark is not being perfect and never making anyone angry. No, it's seeking to bring to life that which does not yet exist, trusting yourself and your vision. It's not taking personal that which is merely part of the process. Because when the storm arrives, that will ultimately carry you through to the most incredible things you'll have ever done in your life. There's a quote from Henry David Thoreau that I've learned to love over the years. He says, "We are constantly invited to be who we are." Meaning, essentially, there is always a hand, reaching out to invite us to leave the confinement we've allowed to become our lives, the pressure of the outside world, and attack a world that means the most to us, not obligatory, but for the opportunity. Because it's there, it's perpetually available, and that's what Henry David Thoreau means. And what's interesting is the second we lose sight of this, our lives become consumed with things that really have no relevance to our goals or our objectives. In fact, the daily routine becomes the goal. It's the box that needs to be checked to feel accomplished. We do things because, well, isn't that what you're supposed to do? Adhere to rules and processes and guidelines, almost like we forget why that routine matters. Like we forget the car has to go somewhere of relevance. You don't just get in and drive it to drive it. That doesn't make sense. And a friend of mine recently showed me this book of insights from different photographers. It's called The Photographer's Playbook, and it's life lessons that helped each one of them along the way. And one that stood out to me specifically was Andrea Parleto. And she talks about a concept called hibernation, or cutting off, temporarily leaving your day-to-day or your craft, so that all the have-tos and the should-bes can dissipate. And you can ask yourself the question that we so quickly lose. The question that should be the target, that should be the foundation we build upon. Who do you want to be? Because when all is said and done, and you're looking back, that's what will matter. That's what will dictate your happiness. Not that you were 5 for 5 on your checklist every day on your 20s, 30s, 40s, and on, right? No. What does it look like when you peel that back? What does it look like under the surface? What makes you, you? And sometimes we have to step back, go away, leave the day-to-day world we've created to see life from a different angle. Eliminate the steps, the requirements, the technicalities, and what are you left with when you put your head on the pillow at night? What makes you smile? Bronnie Ware states in her book, Regrets of the Dying, that not living a life true to oneself was one of the greatest regrets people experience. Isn't it worthy of your time, your attention? Don't you owe it to yourself to make sure that your vision is defined and your actions support that? See, anyone can move just to move, and anyone can breathe just to breathe. But the ones who make the most of each step, each breath, they put themselves in position to live life differently, to accept the invitation to be who they truly are, to take their inspiration, their gifts, and their dreams and never look